Let yourself be swept away by the timeless pleasures of Celtic moods.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. Wait. What's a good Irish name that we could be calling people instead of posers?
What are Irish insults?
Irish slang.
What's up, gobshites? Agents? Langers? Dry shites?
They do say, like Father Ted, they always say, "You big Egypt."
You big Egypt.
It's the crack.
Ooh. Shite hawk.
Langers? What's a langer?
All of these are just for stupid person. Like it needs to be someone. It needs to be more specific.
Fella. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Lickars.
Arsewipe.
These are mean.
Spuds. Potatoes. We're not doing Devo.
What's up, you little wagons?
Yeah, Egypts.
Can we just leave all this in?
I don't know. I mean, we can't.
Is that
maybe
enough? We've thoroughly insulted you in Irish.
Why not? Let's leave it in.
Weirdest intro so far.
Yeah.
That would be funny. You could go listen to the beginning of every single episode and compile the worst intros.
Oh, welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I am your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
But since we're doing an episode on Celtic music, we'll spell it real weird with lots of A's and E's and I's and G's and H's. Hensley's, L-E-I-G-H's. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we can't claim that. We're so British.
Yeah, we're so English. We're Smiths on both sides.
Yeah. Every last name in our family is English. We probably talked about this last year's episode, so we don't have to rehash it entirely. But if you are Irish and you are listening to this episode, we apologize.
Yes, apologies. We are the least equipped people to be discussing Irish heritage and culture, but yet we've made it part of our gimmick. Thank the punk music genre of Celtic punk, though.
We're both married to people with pretty strong Irish heritage. I mean, my wife's very British, but there's some Irish, there's some German,
My wife's not British, she's Scottish, so...
Oh, she's Scottish.
Irish. It's a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah. They would tell you they're very different. They're technically still both Celtic, though, right?
Yeah, I think the Welsh are considered Celtic, too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just where the Celts lived.
Yeah.
Which, would be all of England, actually, but... before the Normans came, but you got to take that up with the Normans and the Saxons.
Yes, this is our yearly St. Paddy's Day special. We call it St. Paddy's Day in regard to Paddy from T4. That's really why. That's why I call it St. Paddy's Day. It's Paddy Costello. But yes, this is our somewhat yearly tradition. We haven't been the most consistent with this, but I think we've done well the last few years. Once we realized, like, hey, we can make it a gimmick, we did it. So we're here. God, this is a weird intro. Yeah, all over the place to begin with. If you head to patreon.com/punklautopod, for $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. And speaking of weird, what did we do last week?
1985 Billboard rock charts. I don't remember exactly which rock chart it is. Is it just the rock charts? It's the rock tracks.
It's the top rock tracks from March 9th, 1985.
The rock music charts in Billboards are really inconsistent for a long time. And then there's like two of them at a certain point.
Yeah.
And it's really confusing. But rock tracks from 1985. And it is heavy on 70s artists.
Yeah. Primarily 70s
weird.
Artists.
So I guess rock radio stations were not hip in the mid-80s.
Yeah, it's a lot of Deep Purple and Foreigner. We got a couple Bryan Adams songs in there. Bryan Adams would be like the one kind of topical. I guess Foreigner is Foreigner considered more of an 80s artist than a 70s?
Yeah, Foreigner starts in the 70s, and they have some pretty significant late 70s records.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very 70s heavy.
Yeah.
It's a strange week for that chart. I would be surprised I would like to look and see like what even a month later how different that chart looks, because it could be one of those charts that's just like there's nothing out right now. Here's what sold and got played on the radio, you know. Yeah, Billboard charts always interesting. This is pre-modern rock charts, so there's no real punk or new wave or anything like that on the chart at all. So it's an interesting one. Yeah, we also have all sorts of other bonus audio, Metalcore Chronicles. We have Challengeography. We have series that we do together, like our bracketologies and our news of the world. All sorts of different gimmicks that we've come up with for the bonus content over the years. And if you join at our $5 producer tier, you get your name said on the show. So we want to shout out our producers. So thank you to Dave Brown, host of the podcast One Band Five Songs. Thank you to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. Thank you to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Nerd Radio. And thank you to Zach in Oregon, who doesn't have a podcast or a newsletter, but has written some stuff for blogs. So there we go. That's something else to shout out.
But you can't find it because we just know him as Zach.
Yeah.
He hasn't given us anything to plug. So
no, but maybe he's got some cool propaganda ticket stubs in CD jewel case that he saved. That's what we'll do. Every time we shout Zach out, it'll be whatever he shared with us in his
his car CD rotation when that changes.
Oh yeah, that's always fun. Yeah,
we'll mention that. So,
and if you would like your name said, you could join at that $5 tier. You also get access to a once monthly bonus audio where we devote an entire episode to an EP. And we have already done a poll for this one, and the poll is closed as of now. And if you'd like to vote in future polls, you can also get in there and get your voice heard. And you could also sign up at the $10 tier where you choose the album we devote an entire episode to. And we have one of those coming up. And be on the lookout for a guest appearance on another podcast. I should be guesting on the podcast Your Music Saved Us, talking about Blenderhead's prime candidate for a burnout. And they'll be joining us soon after. So be on the lookout for that. All of that's available at patreon.com/punklautopod. All right. So the Celtic punk gimmick that we have done for a few years now, there are probably only, 3 or 4 major Celtic punk bands, like really important ones, like ones that a lot of people know. Dropkick Murphys, Flogging Molly, man, it might just be 3. And the one we're doing today. There are more. There are actually quite a few Celtic punk bands out there, but none to the level of these 3. So we're not sure how we're going to go next year, but that's for future us to worry about.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe this is the last St. Paddy's Day special. It depends on how we feel about doing something more obscure, or I feel like we can do one obscure one at least.
You so desperately want to drop this gimmick.
It's one of my least favorite gimmicks, to be completely honest.
I know, it's so funny that like every year we do this and you're just like, just the sigh that comes out of your body. It shows you how English you are, I think, is really what that means.
I don't hate the Irish. Don't put that on me.
You just hate their music. Nah, we could do, what's that band? Black 47, was that the name of that band? We could do the Tossers, the Victory Records Irish punk band. We could cheat and do the real Mackenzies, even though they're Scottish. They're actually Canadian too. They're not even actually from Scotland, but I don't know. I think there's more out there. And also, we have done the Dropkick Murphys. They have kind of like different eras, so we could hit them a few times across. And we did that one so long ago too.
Well, okay, and we can branch out to Celtic rock. We can do the Waterboys.
Yeah,
we could argue for Big Country.
Yeah, I mean, we could just be like Stiff Little Fingers are from Ireland, so we're doing them. We could just pick Irish artists. It would open us up a little more. I mean, I do think we could do some of the more obscure Celtic punk bands. I think there's a handful that would be worth doing. We did do like a Flatfoot 56 EP once, so we could do like one of their albums. That'd be rough.
We could do the Levelers.
Yeah, they're a big one. And there's one that's on the 1985 charts too. That's I've seen their name a bunch. The men they couldn't hang.
Oh, the men they couldn't hang. Yeah.
Yeah. There's more to choose, but I don't know. We just might have to settle on choosing something that maybe isn't that popular to talk about. But yeah, it's a fairly limited genre. It's one of the smaller genres, but it's also one of those ones that the big three command a lot of attention and have really faithful listeners. Like they have all three of those bands have very strong fan bases. And I bet most of the people who listen to those bands don't listen to very many other bands in the Celtic punk genre. Maybe the three. They're like, if you like Dropkick Murphys, you probably like Flogging Molly. But they are also the most different of the big three. But yeah.
I mean, there's the Merry Wallopers.
The Dreadnoughts.
The Dreadnoughts, yeah.
The Rumjacks they're a Sidewind Dummy one. So
yeah.
Don't they predate Flogging Molly on Sidewind Dummy? There's more. There's definitely more out there that we could talk about. Variety, though? I don't know about that. There's not a huge variety in sounds in these bands.
As we will get into on the record.
Yeah, there's one big comparison that I listened to this record and I was like, oh, it's the exact same thing another band did. But we'll save that. So the record we're talking about today came out in the year 1985, and we decided, hey, let's put it in Celtic punk. Oops, there's only two bands. So we just decided to open it up to pretty much most Celtic music in general. So probably this is interesting. So Lorena McKennitt is on here. Her first record, Elemental. My wife is a massive fan of Lorena McKennitt. Her favorite artist. She has all her records. Listens to her all the time. Seen her live. She's from Canada. And I don't know that her music is technically considered Celtic. I think she takes from Celtic music, but she takes from lots of different like new age and folk. And maybe I'm completely talking out my ass. And if I said this to my wife, she would be like, what are you talking about? No, she's extremely Celtic. But from what I can tell from her discography, it's
she has every kind of Celtic music tag on Regular Music. So it seems pretty Celtic to me.
It could be maybe just this first record is one of the strongest of the Celtic records that she did. If you look at maybe, what's the big one? The Book of Secrets from 97. That one's, okay, see, that one's Celtic New Age, but all the subgenres are Arabic folk music, neoclassical New Age, and progressive folk. And that all, to me, makes way more sense. She has lots of songs that use like tons of like Arabic and Middle Eastern music. So I think she evolves after a point, but yeah. She's a McKennitt, so that kind of gives her that, oh, she's Irish, by way of Canada. But what else we have? We have what? Clanad? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, one of the more, significant and older Celtic rock bands. They go back to like 1970.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bunch of 70s, 80s records. They have records up until 2013. Wow, they really hung around. They're still technically around, maybe.
Yeah, I think they still are around. I think they still perform live.
So
never listened to them. I mean,
no, I haven't heard them.
If I have, I didn't know it. We mentioned them already. The Men They Couldn't Hang, Night of a Thousand Candles. This is like the only other Celtic punk record from 1985. They also have the British folk rock tag. Don't know anything about this band. They're from London. Doesn't mean they're not Irish, because our LP's like that today. Who else we got? Is anyone you even heard of?
No, not really.
Yeah, I don't recognize any of these names.
Other than it brings in, these tags bring in, there's a Kate Bush record with, so there might be some Celtic influence on like one song. But, I don't recognize anything else. Christy Moore, I don't recognize that name.
Yeah. The Coreys are on here. I feel like I've heard that band name. Yeah, there's Tony Ireland. He's my favorite Irish musician. His records, John O'Cockley's Well, Dab Hand, Cherish the Ladies, had 2 records. Yeah. This may be a little early for this kind of music to be incorporated into modern music. Like, I imagine there you go back to like the earliest vinyl, there's probably, Celtic folk music records from, way back. But as far as like intertwining it with more modern genres like rock, new age, it's still fairly early because so much of this other stuff is still very folk centric.
Well, there's definitely like there's some degrees of Celtic influence on certain kinds of rock bands in the 70s, like the stuff that was doing like the medieval revival is going to borrow a little bit from Celtic music, but
you mean like Fairport Convention?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Fairport kind of like were a little bit more blues rock on some stuff and then like straight folk on other stuff. But yeah,
I mean, there's the Chieftains and the Dubliners, but they're doing more traditional folk.
Yeah. And that's what most people do. Much more traditional folk.
Yeah.
Founding music. Yeah, it's kind of an odd, I mean, I guess it's like any folk music because like when you really think about it, it's just like, what is Celtic music? It's primarily folk music is what people are referring to when they talk about Celtic music. And like, that's where when you do that with, I don't know, electric guitars, kind of just sounds like the folk music, but you're just playing it on an electric guitar.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, I just put in the entire 80s and only folk punk, and it's like 5 bands for like the entire decade. And most of it is the men they couldn't hang. The one we're talking about today, Nya Fearties is one. The Crop Dusters, McDermott's 2 Hours, Brush Shields, and We Free Kings. Those are the other bands with Celtic punk as subgenres. And even then, it's secondary. The Crop Dusters is the only one that's just Celtic punk. Everything else is Celtic rock with Celtic punk subgenre. So it's not really a genre in the 80s. Like it's two bands really doing everything. So now arguably that makes today's band probably the most important Celtic punk band of all time. And I don't think anybody would really argue with you. You could maybe say Dropkick Murphys are important for future Celtic punk bands.
More than Flogging Molly?
Yeah, because to me, Flogging Molly is just so derivative. But I don't. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, I guess Dropkick Murphys did a significant enough different thing, but like I don't know, like who did they really influence? Well, no one very notable.
Yeah, I mean
they really just made a long career for themselves.
They do predate Flogging Molly too, so that's part of it.
True.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting genre. Not a very big genre. I guess we're lucky there's no like, I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to say gypsy punk is a genre, and we're just lucky there's no like big holiday that would correspond with us devoting. I also couldn't think of like any other band besides Gogol Bordello that would fit that criteria. So we're off the hook for that one. We could cover them one day, but yeah.
They really trying to think of still that really is still the term for that genre of music.
It is what it's called, which Eugene Hutz calls it that, and like because he claims it. You know, he's actually Romani. Are there any others that we're like missing? I mean, I guess there's cowpunk. You could do that, or there's very like Latin music inspired punk bands, but there's not like a genre.
There's not. There's not really a Latin punk genre.
Not a genre. There's Latin rock.
Yeah.
But as far as like the punk bands go, they just incorporate, Latin sounds into it. But yeah, there's not like one big scene like that. Is there? I'm just trying to think of like other places that would have. There's German punk, right? Like, isn't like Deutsch punk like a thing?
Is Deutsch punk a thing?
I think it is. We need to talk to Jason W about that one. I think there is a tag called like Deutsch punk or something like that.
German punk is Deutsch punk is it's who are the bands though? Like Nina Hagen. But are they just German punk bands? Like do they do like
Oompa music
or like Schlager punk songs?
Yeah, I don't know. They might, but I don't know that it's like a widespread thing. I don't think we're getting as many like punk bands playing Oktoberfests as we are, Celtic punk bands doing a St. Paddy's bar show. Because I feel like you could go to so many Irish pubs on St. Patrick's Day and find so many Celtic punk bands, just local Celtic punk bands that never have gotten out of their city. Yeah, there's not a ton of other, like, out of all of the gimmicky things we do, none of them are really based on identity. Like, we do the shoegaze thing, we do the horror punk goth stuff. That's really all we do. We do Christmas too.
We can do. Is there an Oi Day?
Yeah. What would be the Oi Day? I bet if you looked it up, there's probably like, and we could do like National Straight Edge Day. Like, that's a thing we could do. But yeah, I don't know. It is one of the few of the gimmicks we do that is actually like an identity that people tend to latch onto beyond punk music. You could just be like, I'm a goth. You know, that's a person. That's a you choose to be goth. You don't choose to be Irish. You know.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of Americans will choose to be Irish though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're Irish. Just like they'll be like, oh, we're native. You know, like, are you really? But yeah. Well, let's get into it. So normally, like, when we are going through these and picking our albums, we tend to pick some options to talk about. And this one, it was my turn to pick. And we had already pretty much decided last year that we were going to pick who we were going to pick this year. And it's just a matter of like choosing which record. And we'll get more into that. But today we are talking about Rum, Sodomy, and the Lash by the Pogues.
McCormick and Richard Tauber are singing by the bed. There's a glass of punch below your feet and an angel at your head. There's devils on each side of you with bottles in their hand. You need one more drop of poison and you'll dream of foreign lands. When you pissed yourself in Frankfurt and got sipped on in Cologne, and you heard the rattling death trains as you lay there all alone. Frank Ryan bought you whiskey in a brothel in Madrid, and you take some fucking black shirt who was cursing all the yids. And a sick bit of Cuchulainn, well, kneel and say a prayer, but the ghosts are rattling at the door and the devil's in that chair.
So the Pogues formed in King's Cross, London in 1982. This was released August 5th, 1985 on Stiff Records. This is the band's second album. And the person on this record is Shane MacGowan on vocals, Spider Stacy on tin whistle, James Fearnley on accordion, Jim Finner, or Finer, F-I-N-E-R, probably Finner, on banjo, Kate O'Riordan on bass, Andrew Rankin on drums, and Philip Chevron on guitar and mandolin. There are some additional musicians on this record as well. We have Henry Benna on fiddle, Dick Cuthell on French horns, and Tommy Keane on the Uilleann pipes. I believe that's how you pronounce that. Dick Cuthell was in the Specials on the very first record and plays French horn on this album. And this record was recorded at Elephant Studios in Wapping, London, produced by Elvis Costello. And this record was released a year before Blood and Chocolate by Elvis Costello. And previously, he had produced albums by The Specials and Squeeze. So we'll get more into the backstory later. But all right, what is your history with the Pogues?
Not personal at all. I have never listened to a full Pogues record. They are a band that I have known of and very little about for a very long time. They are, the singular point of Celtic punk as an origin, kind of how I know them, and they're the most prominent influence. And they're a band that I think has a little bit of influence beyond Celtic punk. But I have like no personal listening history to them. I can't tell you the first time I heard them. Like I said, I've never listened to a record. I've heard songs. I know what they sounded like, vaguely prior to listening to the record for this episode. But I think my real personal history with it is really kind of like the length of my personal history with Celtic punk of you and I got really into Flogging Molly for a few years as teenagers, and then that was it. So would have heard of the Pogues in reference to Flogging Molly very early, and I think was, it was our interest in Flogging Molly was so heavily during that time period where we didn't have good internet. We had dial-up internet.
Right.
We weren't hanging out with our neighbor who wrote letters to serial killers yet, so we couldn't use his internet.
Yeah.
And so and you weren't in college yet.
Right.
So you were still in high school working at the car wash and buying CDs. So that's what we listened to, were CDs that you bought for the most part.
Yeah.
I had a handful of my own CDs, but you always got paid, you got tips, and you would go buy CDs every week by the handful.
Yeah.
And so we had like all of the Flogging, first 3 whatever Flogging Molly records pretty quickly. And so that was what we listened to. And I think we burned ourselves out on Flogging Molly and the idea of Celtic punk by the time we would have had the option to listen to any Pogues. Because I don't think that we were like, oh, we love the sound of this so much that we want to go take a chance and buy a Pogues record, just because they're an influence on Flogging Molly. We were like, we got the Flogging Molly CDs and we'll just listen to those. So by the time I would have had the option to listen to the Pogues more, I really wasn't that interested in hearing Celtic punk and going any deeper with it, because we just like completely burned ourselves out on it, like a 2-year period probably.
Yeah.
So I've never felt inclined to go back to them. They've always been a work band to me, of just like, there's got to be a reason for me to do it. It's an assignment band.
Yeah. So Flogging Molly would be our introduction to Celtic punk in general. And you're right, we would have listened to those first 3 records and burned ourselves out on them after 2 years probably. And part of that interest in them spun out of me getting those Warped Tour compilations and being always like really interested in any band that was like different or gimmicky, really, ultimately, is what that meant. Because there was like a lot of similar sounding things on those Warped Tour comps, lots of similar like Epitaphat type bands, lots of like the post-hardcore, Equal Vision, style stuff. And so anytime that something kind of like funky popped out, it would be like a Flogging Molly. It would be Gogol Bordello. It would be like anything that was like synth heavy would be kind of like would stand out, like that band VCR. And turns out so many of these bands were just Sidewind dummy bands, which is just very funny that they're just like, and we put our entire roster on this comp. It's like, did they play the Warped Tour? A date. That's usually how it would wind up too. And so I guess I was always like intrigued by those songs, those songs from artists that are outside of the typical genre.
Purely because the guys at Sidewind Dummy were like, you're a good punk band, but do you got any weird instruments?
Yeah. Bedouin Sound Clash.
Violin in middle school.
Great. We're going to sign Ozma now. Yeah. VCR. They got lots of synths in their stuff. Yeah. So getting into them was more of felt honestly more like a novelty, just getting into it at the time. And at the time, I probably wouldn't even really have even considered or even thought about the Pogues. They probably weren't even something that I would have even, like, it probably would have been a name I'd seen, but like I would have known absolutely nothing about them. I wouldn't have known any songs by them at that point. And no one I knew was listening to them at that time either. So it was just like basically a non-entity to me. And I think even at that time, like Dropkick Murphys, to me, I don't even think I even knew of them as a Celtic punk band, because they were on like one of the Warped Tour CDs that I had. And it was like one of the Dropkick Murphys songs without any bagpipes or any whistles or anything like that. It was just like a straight ahead kind of like oi song. So I almost never would have, or a street punk song. Like I don't think I even really, really became aware of what Dropkick Murphys were until like after college. So yeah, there was no genre to me. It was just this band is the one doing it. And then maybe I would have seen something at like a Ren Fair or something like that. So yeah, I was way over the sound by the time it would have become like, I would have become more aware of the Pogues. The first person I know who was into the Pogues was our buddy Grant, who runs Bitter Melody Records. And he was into them in the same way he was into the Clash. He liked a couple of their records and like some of their songs. And he wasn't like a huge regular listener of the Pogues, but he probably had like 1 or 2 records by them. And so that is kind of how I was introduced to them conceptually. It was just like the Pogues, like the Clash, which actually makes sense. There is a connection there between the bands, a couple connections. But I think it took me a really long time before I ever even realized that the Pogues were Celtic punk, like very Celtic. Because before I would have ever heard them or listened to them, I probably would have assumed they were just kind of like the Clash, more like a standard punk band. I did eventually, once I like learned a little more about them, and you get to a certain age, and like I started to hear like every Christmas you'd hear like the Fairy Tale of New York, and like, I would become a little bit more aware of them. I don't think I ever listened to an entire Pogues record until we started this show, and even then, within the last 2 years, I would have listened to them. I guess I could look at Last FM to see what my first listen of them is, at least on, scrobbling it. So I've scrobbled them 81 times, and I've only heard 2 records. This one, and If I Should Fall From Grace with God, which I have 38 scrobbles on that, which means I've probably listened to that record twice. And I have no memory of when that was. 2020, 2022, and the 2025 would be the 3 years that I have listened to any Pogues. So yeah, I never had a Pogues moment, really. Yeah, I listened to that record a year in 2020 and 2022, the exact same record, and then this one twice, 3 times getting ready for the show. So yeah, not a band that I've had a lot of time with.
Well, Jimmy played harmonica in the pub where I was born. He played it from the night time to the peaceful early morn. He soothed the souls of psychos and the men who had the horn, and they all left very happy in the morning. But Jimmy didn't like his place in this world of ours, where the elephant man brought storm in his necks and he had too many pairs. So I sad to see the grieving of the people that I'm leaving, and he took the road for God knows in the morning. We walked into the station in the rain. We kissed him as we put him on the train, and we sang him a song of times long gone. Though we knew that we'd be seeing him again. Sad to say, I must be on my way, so buy me beer and whiskey, cause I'm going far away. I'd like to think I'll be returning when I can to the greatest little boozer and to Sally MacLennane. The years went by and twice.
Let's do some backstory. So, prior to the Pogues, Shane MacGowan would meet Spider Stacy in the toilets at a Ramones show in 1977. The Ramones did it again. MacGowan had a band at the time called the Nips, and then he would eventually join Spider Stacy and Jim Finner's band, the Millwall Chainsaws, who then later changed their name to the New Republicans. After a while, they decided to start a new band, initially called Pogue Mahoney, which is a James Joyce translation of Gaelic for Kiss My Arse. And that lineup eventually brought in James Fearnley, who was also in the Nips. And then they played their first show in October 1982. And then by the end of the month, they had added more musicians. They added James Hassler and Kate O'Riordan. And they kind of became known for their live shows. They were wild live shows, really high energy, fun, lots of drinking. And yeah, they managed to get some attention of other names in the area. They managed to get a opening slot for the Clash on their 1984 tour. And after receiving complaints on the BBC Radio Scotland, the band dropped the Mahoney from their name and just went by the Pogues. They released their debut album, Red Roses for Me, on Stiff Records in 1984. Then after that record, Elvis Costello's manager approached the Pogues to see if they would be interested in having him record 2 songs for them. So they went in the studio, they recorded those 2 songs, and then while they were in the studio, Elvis Costello agreed to just do a whole record. And so then they just recorded a whole record, which is wild. They're like, let's just go in and do 2 songs. And then they're like, actually, let's do a whole album, which has to be like, whoa, were they ready? Did they have all these songs ready? But they seem to. For this record, they did bring in guitarist Philip Chevron. He was in the 77 punk band The Radiators from Space, or The Radiators as they're sometimes known. And yeah, Elvis Costello wanted the band, and Elvis Costello wanted a more organic live quality to the recordings. They really wanted to sound kind of like their live show. And one of the big things that Elvis Costello said is he wanted to get in there and record them himself before some future producer would get in there and fuck them up. So I guess he's like, I want them to be who they are live. This is how I want them to be, because some other producer is going to try and gloss them up and clean them up. The album title comes from a falsely attributed Winston Churchill quote describing the British Royal Navy. So Even in England, the jokes about the Navy are the same. And the album cover is a famous painting called The Raft of Medusa with the band's faces painted over the original.
Yeah, I think sailors have been doing that for a long time.
Look, you're on a boat for a long time.
Yeah, you realize things about yourself.
Man, Steve's looking pretty good over there.
And you don't have society telling you it's wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the main basic story kind of leading up to this record. So, well, this is fresh for you, right? Like, you've not listened to a single Pogues record from front to back.
Yeah.
How was your experience? Love a sigh before the sentence.
The Pogues, I kind of had a feeling it would go this way. And it was kind of the expectation that I had was that's an important band that I probably am not going to enjoy listening to very much. And I tried to not let that expectation color my listening of it. I really, really did try to listen to it with as open mind as I could have. And I don't even like, I guess I have mixed feelings about Celtic music. And a lot of the ways that I feel about Celtic music are certainly how I think a lot of people might have, and even myself to an extent might have about bluegrass. I think they're very similar genres of music, and bluegrass is directly influenced by Celtic music, but they do similar things in it's the runs. It's the melodies. It's the like, it's just so, you know, it's so much of that. And bluegrass is the same way. It's, you know, it's just like, oh, that's a lot of notes. And I'm more accustomed to bluegrass, and like I can pick out more that I like about bluegrass, but it's such a sometimes food genre of music to me. So like with Celtic music, I'm way less familiar with. I'm kind of turned off by it in the same ways that I'm turned off by a lot of, you know, bluegrass or even like, I don't know. It's just like, it's like listening to a lot of world music, you know, to me, where it's just like, this is not something these aren't the kinds of tunes that are common in the music that I listen to. You know, like I wouldn't say that I dislike Greek music, but I'm not going to listen to Greek music. You know, the context for it, I just have none other than the most like stereotypical one, which is not great, and it's not fair to that music. So and I try to keep that in mind when I think about Celtic music, and like when I say I maybe don't like listening to Celtic music, I try to like be aware of the fact that it sounds like your dislike for it is coming from a place of you know, the stereotypical views of Irish people. It's just not enough exposure to enough of it to get a taste for the variety in it. So I was like, if they lean heavily into the Celtic influence, that's gonna be difficult, and they do quite a bit. And that was definitely the hardest part of listening to it. And then what they do that's not super Celtic, or at least like where it really does feel more like a fusion with punk and rock music, I also don't love any part of it too significantly. So it's kind of like, oh, we're doing like a not great clash with Celtic music you're not very familiar with. So I didn't love the music. I didn't love listening to the record, but it was one of those ones where like stepping away from it, like I wasn't like, oh, that was awful, I hated every second of it. Like there's good stuff on there. There are specific songs that we could talk about that like I did genuinely enjoy. I need to pinpoint which ones they were, but like I kind of stepped away from it and was like, how do I grade this? Like, how do I rank this? Like, if it's pure enjoyment, you know, is this like, how many stars is this getting because I respect it? And that's, you know, I guess that's kind of like ultimately my takeaway from it was kind of where I thought it was gonna go, was a respectable band, but also maybe not a band that needed to launch an entire genre. Maybe it's a band that needed to be a singular band, because I don't think that anyone who has followed in the footsteps of the Pogues have done anything that I felt was better.
We danced around at the beginning of the show. Let's kind of like touch on it now. Flogging Molly are just doing the Pogues.
Yeah.
like straight up copying the Pogues. Like there's Dave King sounds exactly like Shane MacGowan.
A little bit harder.
There's a little more crunch, a little bit more. The guitars are a little more distorted.
Yeah, which
maybe
is
a little
the production.
Faster.
Difference. But yeah, it is full on. Just rewriting Pogues records.
Yeah, it's straight up doing the same thing. It is. Now that being said, Flogging Molly came about in a time period where the Pogues were not around anymore, and so I guess there is a piece of them that were like, there's no more Pogues. I mean, there was still Shane MacGowan and the Popes, but I don't know how that band sounds. I wouldn't be surprised if they sound exactly like the Pogues. But yeah, they just were like, we'll do the exact same thing and maybe play just a little faster to get on the Warped Tour, you know. But if the Pogues wanted to play the Warped Tour, they probably could have. They wouldn't have wanted to. But yeah, that was the one thing I was like, God, Flogging Molly just ripped this whole cloth entirely off. And I will say, at least Dropkick Murphys did something different with Celtic music, because really the Celtic influences they include in their sound is primarily just bagpipes and like there's some tin whistle stuff, but they're at their core, they're like an oi street punk band, and then they just added in Irish instruments after the fact. So Dropkick Murphys to me actually I honestly felt like they might not even been influenced by the Pogues, other than the concept of playing punk music with Irish instruments. So they deserve I think they deserve a little distinction for doing something, not just straight up duplicating the Pogues sound. Now everybody who comes after that is probably either copying the Pogues or Dropkick Murphys, but there's that's a different conversation.
A gentleman soldier as the sentry he did stand. He saluted a fair maiden by a waving of his hand, and then he boldly kissed her and he passed it off as a joke. He drilled her up in a sentry box, strapped up in a soldier's cloak, and the drums are going a rockin' and a voice to loudly play. Fare thee well, Polly me dear, I must be gone away. All night they tossed and tumbled till the morning did appear. The soldier rose, put on his clothes and said, "Farewell, my dear." And the drums are loudly beating, and a voice to sweetly play. If it weren't for that, Polly me dear, with you I'd gladly stay. And the drums are going a rockin' and the voice to loudly play. Fare thee well, Polly me dear, I must be gone away. If anyone comes a courting you, you can treat them to a glass. If anyone comes a courting you, you can say you're a country lass. You don't have to tell them that you ever played this joke, that you got drawn in a sentry box wrapped up in a soldier's coat. And the drums are going a rockin' and a voice to loudly play. Fare thee well, Polly me dear, I must be gone away.
So listening to this, I'd never heard this record before getting, for this show. And I listened to it, and my first thought was, we should have chosen the other record. Because that one is better. It's not drastically different, but I think the songs are better. Yeah, I put it on in the car first, was listening to it on the way home after dinner. Wife was in the car. She was singing along to the record, which I found funny because I've never heard her listen to the Pogues before in my entire life, but she knew the songs because a lot of traditional stuff on here. But also, I do think she listened to some Pogues in college. So, because she even asked me, she says, "Don't they have a song called Kiss My Irish Arse?" And I was like, we couldn't find that song. And I think she was just mixing up Pogues Mahoney is Kiss My Arse. And that's what she was thinking. Or she had like a downloaded with like a mislabeled track or something. But yeah, she knew those songs already. I don't know if it was ones that were just traditionals or what. But then I listened to it again myself, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. Ultimately, that was my big takeaway is it's fine. Do I want to listen to this record again? Not really. I could be talked into listening to the next record, or maybe the one with like the boxer on the cover. I'd be curious to hear what some of the later stuff sounds like, if they progress their sound much beyond that. This sound, I don't know if you noticed this. Was your audio fucked up on the back half of this record for you on Spotify?
I didn't notice it.
For some reason, I listened to it on my phone on Spotify, and when you get to the song Jesse James, the volume just cuts by like 30%. And it stays that way for the rest of the album. I don't know why that is. It's obviously an issue with whatever version that was uploaded to Spotify, but
it sounded the same to me.
I don't know. It to me sounded drastically quieter. Like I had to crank it when you get to that song, and I don't turn it back down until I switch to another album. So I don't know.
Maybe volume normalization is off on your Spotify, and mine it's back on. I thought I had turned it off on mine.
I feel like that's always on for me too, though.
But No, I didn't notice any weird fluctuation. I don't know.
It was noticeable. I noticed it in the car and when I was listening to it on my earbuds. It just, something weird going on there. Yeah, I have optimized listening turned on, and it's always been on. So I don't know. Anyway, so you mentioned the punk elements to this record, and my response to that is, what punk elements to this record?
Not enough.
There's like no punk on this record to me. Very little. The only thing that feels like kind of punk is like, it's a little more raucous than you would expect out of a traditional Irish folk group. And there's electric guitar. But I've seen enough bands, I've heard enough like Celtic music that had electric guitars in it that felt more punk and rock based than this album. This album was so much more acoustic than I expected it to be.
Yeah. It doesn't get far enough away from the traditional Celtic sound to really. It definitely feels like punk in spirit. Like when people will say that an artist is like, oh, they're like a punk. It's like when people say that like, Neil Young is punk because he told the label to suck on his rockabilly record.
I mean, it's kind of like how like Billy Bragg is called like, he's a punk musician. It's like, yeah, he's just playing acoustic guitar though. Like that's really it, and not in a folk punk way either. Like,
Billy Bragg also kind of work for me.
I get more out of Billy Bragg than I do the Pogues.
Yeah, true. That
I think his message is really what helps, and the Pogues, it's just like, these are songs about being Irish, or they're just folk songs or covers. It's like, this song's about being Irish. Like, yeah, like the rest of the songs on this record. I fucking hate the line, the he males and the she males on the second track on the record, the Old Main Drag.
Yeah,
what is that? What is it? Also, what's a he male? What? I think he just came up with the line and didn't actually think about it.
Yeah, that sounds funny.
It sounds, yeah. This is also the band who uses the F slur in their Christmas song. So
yeah.
Which I read a thing that was talking about in like 2006, they censored that word in the song in like the BBC radio because people complained. But then so many people counter complained about them taking it out that they put it back in, and it's just there now. Now I get it. It's like a character in that song saying that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they sang that at his funeral too, and I'm like, did y'all do it with the slur at his funeral? That's weird.
Shane would have wanted it.
I mean, yeah, he would have
probably. Yeah, and I mean, Old Main Drag, like it's also a character song.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, they're wearing scally caps and they're like, wearing suspenders and they look like it's the Depression. That kind of. It's very character. Like the Pogues in general are just very character based music.
Yeah,
which is like a folk. I mean, I get that. That's an Irish folk, Celtic folk thing. Is so many songs are about characters and people and things like that. So that's like a direct,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, most music until like the pop music era.
Yeah.
It's like, this is from the perspective of a character. It's narrative.
Yeah. Songs were very narrative driven up until what?
Because you want other people to sing it. And like, this was my shitty day on the farm with all the other pavos. I don't. It needs to be something bigger than that.
I guess it's easier to remember a song too if it's a story.
Yeah.
So that's why so many traditionals are just a story, because all you have to do is remember the story and the melody. Like you don't have to remember every word for word. It's more of just like, this happened next, and this was next. Yeah. Instead of being like, this is a song about your feelings, huh?
And then they killed the witch who stole his pig. Yeah.
But even blues is like that, blues is about all your bad day and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But blues definitely like more personalizes music, lyric writing, and
country. And
now country kind of holds on to a lot of the folk narrative traditions.
Country and bluegrass. Yeah. I guess it's rock music. Is that really where it, like rock, soul, and R&B? Is that kind of?
Yeah. I mean, once people start just singing like generically about my girl and being in love,
yeah,
or wah babaloo bobbin,
I guess big band stuff kind of does too. It's just like you're singing about a big train that's coming, you know,
But
or Mr. Sandman.
you know, it's but yeah, rock music definitely like leans into like the myopic, you know, self-absorbed singer-songwriter type of not singer-songwriter, but I'm just a dude in the band and I sing about being myself.
Yeah. I'm not singing about Tom Dooley.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only songs to me that really had a strong like punk element to it would be Wildcats of Kilkenny, which was like an instrumental song.
One of two or three instrumentals? There's two.
No, I think there's only one.
I felt like there was multiple instrumentals on here.
I think those may have just been introductions or outros to songs.
Yeah.
Or you listen to the bonus tracks because they include the EP after on Spotify.
Oh wait, where's the album? No, I listened to the original version. I didn't listen to the deluxe version of it.
I don't think there is a version that's
There is an original version. I'm looking at it right now. It's the one I listened to. There's an expanded edition, but there is Rum, Sodomy, and Lash by itself. 45 minutes long, 13 songs. Ends on band playing Waltzing Matilda.
Oh, weird. Weird. I only listened to the expanded one. I mean, I stopped taking notes after, the last track of the LP, but that's funny. I didn't actually even go to look to see. Because when I first looked, I was like, an hour 3. Oh, no. And then I was like, oh, bonus tracks. Thank God. Yeah. Maybe that's the problem then, because I listened to the expanded edition. Maybe it's a fuck up on that version.
That one,
the audio.
Yeah.
I'd have to try it. But then it would require listening to the record again.
Yeah, you could take my word for it that the version I listened to was consistent volume level from beginning to end.
I mean, I
didn't have that problem.
I could just do an A/B comparison too, and that would give me the same idea. But yeah, that's funny.
I mean, now you don't have to prove it or anything.
No, I swear it got quieter. Yeah, that one, and then what's the last? The Gentleman's Soldier feels like it has a little bit of a punk edge to it, but that's also the song where they're like doing funny voices.
Oh, don't do the voice.
And I can't tell if that's just somebody else singing in a voice, because I know Spider sings Jesse James, Kate sings I'm a Man You Don't Meet Every Day. Here's my hot take: Kate should have sung more.
Yeah, like more than half of the songs.
Yeah, I think she should have.
Because I'm a Man You Don't Meet Every Day. Great song.
I really like that song.
Really pretty song. She sounds great singing it.
She sings in. Does she sing in the opening as well? Or maybe it's Old Main Drag. She sings on a couple tracks, but not like the lead singer.
Yeah, I don't think she leads. That's the only song where she's the lead vocalist.
Spider does the one song that he leads, and then Gentleman's Soldier. That might be Spider singing with Shane, but I also don't know. It could be the guitarist, I believe, Philip Chevron.
She shows up on some Elvis Costello stuff.
Because she quits the band and marries Elvis Costello.
Oh,
she's gone. After this record, I think she's on the EP, but she quits the band and marries Elvis Costello.
Are they still married?
No, I think they split up in 2002 or something like that. But they were together for a good while though.
Yeah.
Yeah. She quit the band after this record, and like Fairy Tale of New York has Christy McCall singing on that song.
Right.
Which they cover one of her songs on this album. Let's see. There's a couple covers. Let me pull up the actual track listing on this record to see which ones are originals. Because the first record they did, Red Roses for Me, is a lot more covers than traditionals. So 6 of the 13 songs on that record are traditionals or covers. And this album, I'm a Man You Don't Meet Every Day, is a traditional. Yeah. But it's their unique arrangement. Dirty Old Town is a Ewan MacColl cover. He's a British folk musician. Jesse James is a traditional that they rearranged. Navigator is a Phil Gaston song. Oh, but he wrote it for them. He was in the Nips with Shane McGowan. So it's essentially an original.
Ewan MacColl was married to Peggy Seeger, who was sister to Mike Seeger and half sister to Pete Seeger. Peggy Seeger currently lives in Asheville.
Weird. Gentleman Soldier is another traditional they rearranged, and then the final track and the band played Waltzing Matilda is an Eric Bogle song, and he's an Australian singer-songwriter. Scottish Australian. He's born and raised in Scotland, then moved to Australia. So the hit it became a hit in Australia. And the song's about being in Australia too, about the Gallipoli campaign. So this record, there's
3 traditionals.
Yeah, 2 covers and then one written for them.
Yeah,
I'd still count that one as an original because he wrote it for the band. So that was a thing that people really talked about too when this record came out, was that Shane MacGowan's songwriting like drastically improves from record to record. Like he apparently like just got so much better as a songwriter from the first album to the second one, which is only like a year apart. And a lot of reviews or write-ups from the time seem to imply that Elvis Costello was part of that growth as a songwriter. Which maybe he pushed him in a way that he hadn't been pushed yet, but I wouldn't know because I haven't heard that first record. The singles for this album, which were A Pair of Brown Eyes.
A good choice.
Yeah, it hit number 72 on the UK singles chart. Not that high of a chart. Sally MacLennane and Dirty Old Town were also released as singles. I'm surprised Dirty Old Town didn't chart because that felt like that's a cover too. That's the Ewan McCall song, but it was made popular by the Dubliners, so they did a version of it. I'm surprised that one didn't do more, because that one, when I listened to it, felt like a single to me, even though it's a slow song.
Yeah, it's a slow song.
Maybe that's why ultimately it wasn't chosen, but maybe it was just the fact that it was a song and a single prior to this is why it felt like a single to me listening to it. But yeah, but those didn't chart. This one, the album hit number 13 on the UK album charts. So the album does well. The single, not so much, but the album itself does pretty well. They also chart in Australia, New Zealand, and Sweden, and they went gold in the UK and France. And so one element that was criticized of them was that the band failed to capitalize on their new success and didn't like go right in the studio and make another album. Instead, they went in and did the EP, Pogues in Motion, which I hear that complaint, and I go, they did 2 records back to back. Their first record was 84. This record was 85.
Yeah, but they got successful on the second one. They needed to follow up on the success.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they do take 2 years before they do another LP. 88 is when the next record comes out.
Is that coming from British press? Do you feel
probably? Yeah, I think it's British press.
Yeah, they're like, why haven't you done more? Like, they're just like, go. You have to go. You get success in England. They move fast. They move on to the next thing. They're just like, oh, they pissed around for the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's really funny to be like, oh, why aren't you capitalizing? It's like, they're touring? You know, like they're playing live shows.
I don't have the songs yet. They burned all their songs on 2 LPs back to back.
Yeah. And which is funny to say that because I'm pretty sure the next record was an even bigger hit too. So it's, I mean, at hindsight 2020 being that, they did capitalize on it. It just wasn't like immediate. Pogues in Motion. Yeah, it comes out in February of 86. And If I Should Fall from Grace with God comes out in January of 88. So they recorded it in 87. And then that one they recorded with Steve Lillywhite. And that record does better. It's number 3 in the UK. So like, hold your horses. I want it now. Yeah. Also, Stiff Records went bankrupt in 1987. So that might be part of it. Where they're like, oh, okay. We can't really do a lot. Yeah. They, like I said, they go on to release 3 more albums. If I Should Fall from Grace with God in 1988, Peace and Love in 1989, and Hell's Ditch in 1990. They then wind up firing Shane MacGowan for his drug and alcohol addiction, and that was because it was affecting their live shows. Like he didn't show up for shows, he missed shows entirely. Very erratic behavior. Couldn't sing on stage because he was so fucked up. Just like one of the famous drunks in punk music. Just could not hold it together. So they fire him. He goes on to form Shane MacGowan and the Popes. And then the Pogues would continue without him. They would do 2 more records, Waiting for Herb in 1993 and Pogue Mahoney in 1996. I don't know who sings lead on those. I'm assuming it's Spider.
Yeah.
They wind up breaking up in 96 because the last record just doesn't do well. And then they reform with Shane in 2001. But they never do another record. They just basically become a live band, a reunion band. Philip Chevron passed away in 2014, and they would break up again. And then Shane MacGowan passed away in 2023. And then the surviving members would reunite the band in 2024. So it's weird. Philip dies and they go, all right, we can't do this anymore. Shane dies and they go, I think we could do this again. It's like, well, we did it before without Shane. Yeah.
Yeah. They clearly didn't like him.
Yeah. Shane seemed like a difficult person.
Expendable.
Right.
One of the, singular aspects of the band. Like when people think of the Pogues, they know who the Pogues are. They know who he is.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like with Queen, where it's like, damn, Queen died when Freddie Mercury did. And then Brian May is like, the most exciting part of the story is when Queen gets back together after Freddie dies. It's like, that's not the most exciting part of the story. Nobody gives a shit about that part.
We want the virtuoso singer with the mustache and the big teeth.
Yeah. Not Adam Lambert. It's weird whenever like someone in a band doesn't realize like, who the star is, right?
I mean, Queen, like Brian does at least have like, he is half that band. So
yeah.
I guess from his perspective, he was doing all the heavy lifting, but
yeah. So what's Spider's instrument? Tin whistle. He doesn't play anything else in the band. Man, Philip Chevron has more of a claim, and he was added later. Wait, who played guitar on the first record? Because there's no other, unless there's just somebody was in it already. Let's see. Personnel. Wikipedia doesn't have who plays what. There is no. It's all the same people, and they add Phil. So I'm guessing one of them picked up the guitar. Maybe James or Jim. Jim plays banjo, so he probably played guitar on the first record. Because it's Jim, Spider, and Shane. They're the original three members of the band. So unless Stacy did, or Spider Stacy played guitar, but it's probably Jim. Yeah. It's just funny when you're just like, yeah, I think we'll keep going without you, Shane. Yeah, okay. And you wonder why that last record didn't do well. I mean, the record was critically acclaimed at the time, very well regarded, and it's been retroactively highly well regarded. People like this record. It is considered like one of their best albums. It's this record and If I Should Fall from Grace with God. It's a tough album title. Too many words. I didn't look at Rate Your Music to see which. I think this is the second highest rated. Let's see. They're evenly rated. They both are 3.79s. So yeah, these two records are the ones that people like the most. This one's actually more popular. That's weird to me. At least just on Rate Your Music. That is weird to me. If you look at the Pogues on Spotify, If I Should Fall from Grace is the most popular, and Fairy Tale is the most popular song by 400 million. Because the next one down is Dirty Old Town with 69 million. So never underestimate the power of Christmas. So those songs are more listened to. So yeah, it's probably like looks like a fairly even. These are the two records from them that people listen to. Though weirdly, I feel like I've seen that album cover for Peace and Love with the boxer on it, like almost more. Is there a song on that got posted on Tumblr a million times?
Oh, is there? Maybe.
Because I feel like I saw that album cover on Tumblr like every day. I don't know. The highest rated song on Rate Your Music is White City, which is the second track. But which if you look at there's nothing in their top 10 tracks from that album though.
No.
I don't know. Weird. I mean, it's well regarded. People like it. It's popular.
Like I said, I respect it.
I respect it. I respect them.
I don't think it's for me.
I didn't really enjoy listening to it. I didn't like actively dislike it. It was kind of just there for me though. I don't know. Maybe it's a case of
overexposure to Flogging Molly.
Yeah.
Burned out those receptors in our brains
for this exact style of Celtic punk. Probably.
Yeah, it is so directly copied.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so similar.
Which I don't even truly hold against Flogging Molly, because you make the valid point that the Pogues weren't really around for them to just be like, hey, we're gonna do that. That's like my favorite band, so I'm gonna do that. Like, sure, there's plenty of cases of people doing incredibly derivative work that I don't have a problem with. It's not really the criticism I have. I don't think it's a fair criticism of a lot of bands.
Yeah.
It's just what you say that sounds more objective than I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Which is what you like for me to have to say about the Pogues. And like maybe for me, like we're doing it backwards. It's like, yes, I know that the Pogues were what influenced Flogging Molly, but because I heard Flogging Molly so much first, everything that the Pogues did, I'm going to hear after, and it's just going to be like, well, I've heard this already, and I've wrung out most of the enjoyment I'm going to from this sound. And yeah, maybe you should listen to the later records. Maybe they differentiate themselves more.
Yeah, like I have no
maybe
idea.
The songs are just stronger on the later records.
Yeah. I was looking at Flogging Molly formed in 94, but they stay a bar band until they release their live record, Alive Behind the Green Door, in 97. So that record comes out after the Pogues break up. So yeah, it is a case of, well, the Pogues are done. We could put out our live record. And then their first LP is 2000. So probably in their mind, they're filling a void.
And then we'll give Molly Malone's a way to trick people into playing bringer shows.
Flogging Molly got their start here.
Everybody's got to go through the bringer venues at some point in LA. You got to play one of them. I've played 2. Only once with this band.
Now you need to play the whiskey.
God, no. That's full on pay to play. That's 50 tickets minimum to keep your opening slot. Absolutely terrible shows. Only.
Yeah, I don't know. This record's just not for me.
Yeah.
And I feel really bad saying this.
Yeah, it does feel bad.
Out of the big 3, they're my least favorite. And I guess it's not really fair because Flogging Molly's just copying them exactly. But I have at least nostalgia for those first 3 records.
Well, yeah, that's which one would I actually pick? I would feel enough shame
to bump them up
about picking Flogging Molly over the Pogues that I would pick the Pogues. Like, gun to your head, which one are you going to listen to? I'm going to be like, the Pogues.
But if you're just alone in your car and you're like, which one am I going to pick?
Which one am I going to know already?
Where does Dropkick Murphys fit in there?
In my ranking?
To me, they're number 2. Regardless of whether I feel shame or not, I'm either flipping Pogues and Flogging Molly between 1 and 3. For some reason, I keep Dropkick Murphys steady 2. I don't know what it is. Why?
Dropkick Murphys can never be number 1.
No,
because they can't. I don't know. There's not a real reason. They just feel like a number 2 band. Second best.
They may be the most consistent, though.
Probably.
And probably a wider or a higher amount of records that are better.
Yeah, probably.
But I don't know. Like I said, I only know these 2 Pogues records, but not for me. Well, let's give it a rating and get on out of here. I'm going to go with a 3.0.
I'm going to go with a 2.5 because that is right down the middle.
Smack dab in the middle. Yeah, I think it's just... Yeah, I'm probably giving it like that extra half star just for...
Yeah, that's me giving it extra half star.
Oh, okay. Whoa. So you just liked it more than I did. Okay.
I'm getting tougher on rating stuff, I will say, than I have been in the past. I've noticed that I'm getting into that, like, too many records are 3.5, 4 stars. And I'm like, that can't be right. That scale is curved.
Because you're not listening to the stuff that you're going to give a 1. That's part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not finishing those records.
Yeah, that's the bad thing about like rating things like that. That is very much I
will
listen to the stuff
I
like.
Yeah, I will occasionally rate stuff low that I started and didn't finish, and I will give it a low rating. And because I feel like if I start the record in earnest and it turns me off that quickly, if I get a couple songs into it, then I'll give it a rating. And I'm like, no, this didn't work. This isn't for me. I'll give it a low rating. Because I feel like that's fair. I did give it a shot. I didn't listen to the whole thing. There was nothing there was nothing implying that the last half of the record was somehow going to be better than the first 3 songs to change my mind. That doesn't happen too often.
I personally wouldn't rate an album that I don't finish.
I'll also skim. I'll skip and skim a little bit too, to just be like, let me see what else is on here. But no, I don't listen. I don't get very far. If I'm like, I put it on and I'm like, first song, no, I'm not gonna rate it. But if I try to get into it, I'll give it a rating. Well, what are we doing next year, Dave?
Maybe, I don't know.
Is Dave gonna come on?
Yeah, he offered to come do another Dropkick Murphys record, and I wouldn't be against doing another one. Because the one we did was like not one of their big ones, and
probably not the best.
And it was a 2020, so it's been a while. Yeah. Well, enjoy
the bad rating on this episode on our podcast on.
Yeah, I think it'll do it for us. So thank you so much for listening. And you can follow us on all forms of social media at PunkLottoPod, our voicemail line 202-688-PUNK, and our email address punklotopod@gmail.com. Shoot us a message and tell us how much you hated our review of this record. You can't get mad at an opinion. It's just an opinion. People get mad at opinions all the time.
People do. They do.
Yeah.
That's fine. I support it.
We kept saying it's not for us.
Yeah. I'm fine with it. I'm over it.
I don't even care.
You're not gonna hurt me. You can go listen to my band and tell me that they suck. I don't give a shit.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Celtic Moods, call the number on your screen or send check or money order for the amount shown plus shipping and handling. Rush delivery available. Call now.